All right. Welcome to the A's Philosophy YouTube channel. I am A's Philosophy, and tonight, or at this time of this broadcast, we are going to be having an open discussion. I wanted to get something going because it's been a little bit since I've done anything, so I thought I'd throw something in there. The only problem is I am very short on time. So I don't think we're going to have a whole lot of time, like as usual, an unlimited amount of time. Well, it's never really unlimited, but tonight's gonna probably be a little bit. I'm gonna have say maybe max 2 hours, like absolute max. We got Mike in the chat. We got Andy. Andy as well. There we go. Good to see everybody. So yeah, but hopefully in that amount of time we can cover some ground. Definitely hoping to hear from some people. I've been hoping to hear some thoughts about some topics, but while we're kind of getting things started here, I did want to kind of riff a little bit, and then I'll post the link to the StreamYard in about 10 minutes or so, 5-10 minutes. But I did want to get some thoughts out. Continue to just be aware of ideas going on out there. I try to listen to basically arguments being brought forth. We got Von Eric, good to see you as well. Arguments being okay, Andy's talking to Mike. That's cool. From the atheists and also from the Christians. And truth be told, what Christianity today is actually, in my opinion, it's worse than atheism for those who take the idea of God seriously. So that's not a knock on atheists. I'm not trying to insult atheists. What I am trying to say is that when it comes to what Christianity is, and assuming that God really does exist and that there is going to be like a judgment for our souls and things like that, which again would need to be proven, Christianity is actually more dangerous than atheism, assuming all that's true. Now, if none of that's true, then obviously the atheists win, and they can be happy about that. But when I look at what Christianity is, let me give you an example. Even today, I heard a very, very prominent Christian teacher, evangelist, whatever you want to say, he's not the first person to say this, obviously. This is something you hear constantly, but I heard it, and it just struck me. It always strikes me as just how I don't understand how anyone takes it seriously, is the idea that trusting in Christ means not trusting in your own works. Now, let's kind of break that down, because this is something that Christians are being taught at a very prevalent level, especially in evangelical America. Trusting in Christ means not trusting in yourself. And what does that mean? Well, when they elaborate, what they mean by that is trusting in Christ means not trusting in your own righteousness, but in the righteousness of Christ. But what that message entails is the following. The ultimate conclusion of that is your righteousness is not where you should be focusing, because Christ did it for you. Christ was the atoning sacrifice. He followed the law. He was righteous for you. So you need to simply trust Christ's righteousness and not your own. But what is it? What is that? Let's think about that. If you aren't trusting in your own righteousness, what is righteousness? Righteousness, in a theological context, is basically being obedient to the will of God. So if you are not trusting in your own righteousness, quote unquote, what you are not doing is worrying about whether you have to obey God or not. That's the message at the end of the day. You do not have to worry about whether you obey God or not. That's not Christianity. Christianity isn't about being a good person. It's not about doing good things. Those are things we do because we're grateful, because we've been saved by Christ, you see. But they're not necessary. And if you think they're necessary, then you're under a satanic delusion, okay? Because that means you don't trust Christ. So, according to modern churches, believing you have to obey God is satanic, which is insane. It really is insane. But this is what people are being taught, and this is why things are so bad. And this is what I'm trying to fight against. I'm trying to break through to people, help them see that something's not making sense here. When the ultimate conclusion of your ideas as a Christian, and again, we're assuming here these people take the idea of God seriously. They take the idea of the soul seriously and judgment and things like that. When your version of Christianity, the logical conclusion is that you can't believe, you have to obey God, which is literally what the devil taught, whether you take the devil as a literal being or not, or a metaphor, or whatever you want to think of it as, something's clearly wrong. Okay, so this is what modern Christianity is. It's actually Satanism. And how are modern Christians any better than people who say there's no morality whatsoever? They're not. Because what do the atheists say? There's no objective morality. Okay, it's all relative. It's all evolutionary pressures and things like that developed over a long period of time. Well, Christianity is really no better because you're not obligated to be a moral person. You have the blood of Christ that has been shed for you and pays for your sins. So you don't have to follow any law. You don't have to follow any standard of righteousness. You don't have to not kill people and steal from them and lie to them, and all those, all those kinds of things. So at the end of the day, it's all moral relativism. It's all offloading responsibility for yourself onto something else, or pretending that no responsibility exists. So modern Christianity is a very, very dangerous idea, and it needs to be fought. It needs to be exposed, and it needs to be replaced with the truth, with the origin of what it originally was, which is what Christ taught, which is obedience to God, just as all the prophets taught, and which is what the truth is. So that's what I'm going to continue to do. And now we've got that out of the way, I'm going to post the link, and people can join. Pin it. Okay, there it is. See if anyone joins. No one's obligated to join, obviously, but if you want to, you can. And if you just want to make comments, we got Andy. Good to see you, Andy. How are you doing?
Hello, sir.
Hello. How you been?
I've been all right. Hang on, I'm connecting my headphones. Sorry.
All right. You good? And by the way, folks, I did tell Andy that I would make him the firstborn of this stream. And by firstborn, I mean preeminent. Because according to the Trinitarians, there's a verse in Colossians which says that Christ is the firstborn of all creation. But that doesn't mean he was born. It means he was preeminent among creation. So I'm going to make Andy the firstborn of this stream, because we've been talking about Homer's Epics and that whole idea. So I didn't know if you had any thoughts on that, Andy, but feel free to expound any thoughts you may have on that, or anything else. It doesn't have to be about that. It can be about whatever you want, because you're the first guest.
Yeah, I do. I actually wrote a shitload about that. I don't
Well, I'm glad you're here. Yeah, let's lay it out. Let's take some time. Take 5-10 minutes to read your thoughts and explain why you think that the gospel narratives are mimicking Homer's epics. Take a little. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I wrote it out in kind of a strange format, I guess. So I don't really have I don't know if I can just make the point by speaking in paragraph form, but I addressed it one similarity at a time.
Okay, well, how about we do this? I'm going to share my screen, and what I'm going to do is bring up Dennis MacDonald's list of parallels.
Okay, perfect.
And then we can kind of run through them. And Faithful, I see you there, and I want to talk to you as well. And we can hopefully get to that. I do want to let you know that I've been wanting to speak with Andy about this topic. So I do want to cover that and take some time with that. And then I also want to speak with you as well at some point. So just be patient.
Okay, I will.
I'll be as fast as I can.
Let's see if this works. Let's see. No, I should just bring up that presentation entirely. Yeah, let's bring up the presentation and see if that's a little bit easier to read. I guess it's still a little bit small. Let's bring it up and see how it looks. All right. And hopefully it doesn't have that annoying echo that it had the other day. If it does, we might have to.
That.
Yeah, All right, how's the audio? Can you all hear an echo or anything?
It's good.
No.
Kind of?
No, you're good.
Okay,
I believe the tab was glitched out. Sorry about that, Ace.
But now it's fine?
Yes, it's fine.
Yeah. Okay, good. All right, we can move forward then. All right, so here is Dennis McDonald. He's a professor and a textual critic, if you want to call him that, who has a theory that basically a number of books in the New Testament were.
Yeah, he says more than half of the stories in Mark.
Yeah, so not only Mark. I remember originally he was just talking about Luke and the Book of Acts, and then
John. Actually, he's been writing about the parallels between John and Euripides since the 90s.
Yeah, so basically his thesis is that the Gospels were essentially crafted by reading Greek classical poetry, classical to us, that is, and basically imitating it. Obviously not word for word or line for line, but just basically looking at it and imitating it in such a way that it would be recognizable, but also stand on its own as a work of literature that would be of cultural influence. Am I getting that right, Andy? Is that essentially what he's arguing?
Yeah, no, you pretty much nailed it. They're basically using the Homeric Epics and Euripides' Dionysian plays and things like that. Even what seems to be a little bit of Virgil, who was also copying or performing a imitation of Homer. There even seems to be a little bit of drawing from that, but they were basically, from what Dennis argues, trying to create their own founding mythology.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I gave a presentation about a week ago looking into one of the narratives that was supposedly a parallel between Mark, the Gospel of Mark, and Homer's The Odyssey, specifically the Gerasene demoniac, which is supposed to be a parallel from the Odyssey, where Odysseus meets the Cyclops and the goddess Circe. So here we have a table that Dennis McDonald created, and I just copied it. I didn't change anything, really. And there are 17 parallels between the Odyssey and the Gospel of Mark. And I don't know how you wanted to do it, Andy. If you wanted to just go one by one, like the first one is Odysseus. Yeah. So, all right, Odysseus and his crew sail to the land of the Cyclops and of Circe. And then in Mark, Jesus and his disciples sail to the land of the Gerasenes. Do you have anything to say about that?
Yeah. So basically, I responded to what you had said specifically about the parallels.
I said
that it wasn't a significant parallel. Most people sailed in the Mediterranean, essentially.
Exactly. Okay.
So my response, and to be fair, I mostly agree with you. It's not a very strong parallel. Like, most people did sail in the Mediterranean. Let's be real. But I said, yes, sailing isn't necessarily a strong parallel, given that many sailed during that time. But it's important to keep in mind how readers of Homer would have remembered the story. If I were to tell the Odyssey story with minimal details, it seems likely to include the fact that they sailed rather than just saying they went to the land of so-and-so, because as a reader, you'd wonder how they got there. Also, it's not the significance of each individual parallel that's pulling the weight in syncretic mimesis. The parallels are just there to signal to the reader that the original story is being referenced, so the reader notices when there are differences, which is where the message is held. Or at the very least, just a byproduct of the differences being targeted. The differences are the important part of syncretic mimesis, and when there are differences, that's when you look to see if the newer story is glorifying or demonizing, Because the sailing is insignificant and there aren't any significant differences to the Homeric story, it would be most logical to conclude that the sailing parallel is just one of many signals to the reader to let them know that Mark is making a comparison to the Odyssey, and the signal is just being used to set up the upcoming differences. But
That's interesting. So essentially, my comment on this particular, which is the first of the 17, is that it's not significant. But you're arguing it's more of a cumulative effect where this is more of an initiation into the idea that there's a mimesis going on, and then the rest of them are going to kind of cement that.
Yeah, but like basically the parallels are. Maybe I chose my words poorly there. I don't really know how to word it like I'm trying to convey it, but they're just, the parallels are definitely important in mimesis. Like, you need the reader to understand that you're referencing the older story. If that is your goal, you may be doing it in secrecy. But if Dennis is right and he's trying to get the readers to notice it intentionally, the differences are going to be the important part of the story. You know what I mean? Because otherwise it wouldn't be mimesis. It would just be plagiarism if we were copying, one for one on everything. And in the differences, often, in fact, most times when there are differences in these parallels, you'll see that it glorifies Jesus or demonizes the demons, or there's a lot of different other. But that's about all I had to say about that one.
Let's do it this way. Let's kind of roll through them, and then we'll kind of back out and get like a bird's eye view of it all, and try to discuss the topic in a more general fashion about whether this is a good idea or not. All right. So number 2 is on the mountains of the Cyclops, innumerable goats graze. Circe turned men into swine, and then in Mark, on a mountain, a large herd of swine graze. So I believe that if Mark was trying to signal to his readers that he's mimicking the Odyssey, he would have used goats and not swine, because that would have been more obvious. So what do you say to that?
Okay. There were 2 questions. You had said, why did he change it from goats to swine? 3. The Odyssey says that they went to an island, and Mark says that demoniac lived in a mountain. And why is the Odysseus story so much more complex and detailed than Mark's demoniac story?
Right.
So the Odyssey specifically, or the Odyssey specifies that the Cyclops lived in mountains, saying, quote, they live without a council or assembly or any rule of law in hollow caves among the mountaintops, end quote. Yes, it was on an island, but it was on a mountain on that island. The point is simply that both stories have the hero and his crew sailing to a place where there's a lawless savage that lived in a cave in a mountain, which occurs in both stories. As for Mark using swine instead of goats, this was a result of and reference to Circe turning Odysseus's crew into swine. This is one of the most important differences because it glorifies Jesus and further demonizes the demons. In the Odyssey, Circe turns Odysseus's crew into swine. In the Mark story, this would equate to Jesus turning his 12 disciples into swine, which would be evil. Instead, Mark seems to replace the innumerable goats with the 2,000 swine, and instead of Jesus turning his disciples into swine, Jesus turns the demons into swine. This not only glorifies Jesus by having him not tormenting the disciples, but it also shows Jesus' mercy by allowing the demons to go into the swine as they wished, and it demonstrates an increase in divine power compared to Circe, turning 2,000 into swine as opposed to turning 12 into swine. It also takes the opportunity to portray the demons as disgusting, making them choose to become swine, and further shows how disgusting the demons were by causing even the swine such disgust with the demons being inside of them that they ran off the cliff to escape the disgust. It also further insults the demons by not even giving the demons full autonomy over the swine. Dr. MacDonald also leaves out a parallel here. In both stories, the crew and the demons beg Circe or Jesus to save them from their powers. The crew of 12 beg Circe to turn them back to humans, and the 2,000 demons beg Jesus to be allowed to go into the swine. he also leaves out another parallel, being that they both suffered a storm on the journey of going to the land of the savage. This was another example of what appears to be syncretic mimesis, because it again glorifies Jesus. Odysseus was scared and hopeless in the Homeric Epic and even considered abandoning the vessel. Jesus is so calm that he sleeps during the storm and handles the storm easily with the divine power of God. As for the Mark story being less detailed and less complex, with syncretic mimesis, the story that's mimicking the older story almost always reduces in detail and complexity. So the Mark story decreasing in detail would be exactly what we should expect if the author of Mark is using syncretic mimesis. This could be the result of the author mimicking the story from memory instead of reading it from the book directly while authoring. Or it could potentially be the result of the author intentionally leaving out details to make the story more adaptable to a larger variety of cultures, or even leaving out details to make the Mark story easier to remember and therefore easier to spread. I'm sorry, that was really long-winded.
No, yeah, it is a lot, but it's all very interesting. So do you think to yourself that all that you just read, that Mark kind of thought all of that as well as he was writing his narrative? Or do you think that's more something that you're seeing, but Mark didn't necessarily think?
No, I 100% think it was intentional. Like just as Dennis is conveying it. I think he's exactly right.
Oh.
Yeah, I think Mark
What
did
do
this
you
intentionally.
So one of the things that Dennis MacDonald constantly stressed was an important aspect of this whole idea is the ordering or sequence of a storm.
I responded to that too.
Okay, well, let's keep going then. All right, so number 3, Odysseus and his crew of 12 chosen men, parentheses, disembarked. Jesus and his crew disembarked. Okay, what do you have to say about this?
Okay. The claim was the 12 disciples was a clear callback to the 12 tribes of Israel, and it didn't come from mimicking Odysseus having 12 crew members accompanying him. I already read this response, but I added to it, so I'm just going to reread it really quick. It's not long.
All right.
The 12 disciples is indeed most likely a callback to the 12 tribes of Israel, but that's only the tip of the iceberg. The number 12 was extremely sacred across the entire Mediterranean and beyond. The Egyptians divided the days into 12 parts on their sundials. The Eblaites created the 12-month year. The Sumerians used the government system with 12 officials. The Babylonians created the 12 zodiac signs. The Minoans created the 12 Olympians. The Greeks with the 12 trials of Heracles. The Hittites worshipped a group of 12 gods. The Romans had the 12 tables of the law. The Zoroastrians had the 12 commanders of light. Homer repeatedly using the number 12 in his stories, and probably dozens of other examples that I'm leaving out. Everyone around the Mediterranean held the number 12 sacred in some way, and this took place for thousands of years prior to the New Testament and even long before the Old Testament or Homer's epics were authored. It's not that the number of disciples was chosen because Odysseus had 12 crew members, but it's more likely that the Cyclops story stood out to Mark and was chosen by Mark to mimic because of A, the storm, because storms were and are extremely common in the Sea of Galilee, and B, because of the use of the sacred number 12 being used repeatedly in the Odyssey. And examples from the Odyssey of the number 12 being used are 12 chiefs and noblemen at the feast, 12 suitors that are slaughtered, the 12 oxen of Helios, the 12 gods of Olympus, the 12 kings of the underworld, 12 crew members on his crew that went with him. There were 12 ships, 12 islands scattered throughout the Mediterranean, and the actual span of the Odyssey being a 12-year journey. The entire story is littered with the number 12, and this would have stood out like a sore thumb to virtually anyone Jewish in the first century, given the repeated use of 12 across the Mediterranean, but more specifically repeatedly being used in the Old Testament.
So let me ask you a question. You have Mark. Okay, let's just say Mark is a real person, and according to tradition, he was the interpreter of Peter as Peter traveled around spreading the gospel. Again, that's I'm not saying any of that's proven. I'm just saying that's what tradition holds, and that comes from
Right.
Papias. So, do you think that the most likely explanation of, and again, we're assuming Mark in priority, which is the idea that Mark wrote his gospel first, and then the others copied him, which is what a lot of scholars think.
Yep.
So Mark would be the source for all the others, in addition to the Q document, if that exists. So let's just say Mark was a real person who really wrote this gospel. You really, so your opinion is that he was familiar enough with the Odyssey and liked it enough that he basically created a narrative where he wanted Jesus to have 12 apostles, and that would be a signal that we're mimicking the Odyssey. Is that, am I getting you right?
No, I don't think that this was a signal necessarily. I just think that the number 12 being used repeatedly in the Odyssey would have made these stories stand out to Mark. It's not that he obviously based the 12 disciples. You're absolutely right. He was basing it off of the Old Testament usage of the number 12. That seems much more likely because that's their religion.
Right.
But the fact that the Homer story repeatedly, uses and even glorifies the number 12, it's going to stand out to a bunch of Jews that are already obsessing over the number 12.
Right. So let me ask you this. Do you think the people who wrote the quote unquote Old Testament, which is obviously did that way before Mark was around, do you think they were looking around at near these other cultural literature and saying, you know what, they're all using the number 12. Maybe we should use the number 12 too. And we're going to have 12 tribes. Do you think that's kind of what happened?
Exactly.
So the idea that there really were just 12 sons of, who was it, Isaac or Jacob? I think it was Isaac, right?
Yeah.
One of the patriarchs had 12 children who gave birth to the 12 tribes. You think that's okay? It was Jacob. Okay. You kind of discount the idea that that's actual history. You don't think there's any validity to that, and not a real historical event.
Yeah, I don't think that it was actual history. Just kind of like almost mimesis.
So do you think that like Jacob and his 12 sons are just mythological figures that didn't exist at all in reality? None of that really happened.
All of the patriarchs and Moses, I don't think, are real people.
So Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, none of them actually existed.
Yeah. Although, what I do wonder at least is that maybe it was like a really heavily mythologized version of like a story about some figure that actually did exist that had a way less significant, just more or less like some guy that did one amazing thing and they glorify them in like a divine sense.
At what point, if you were to look back into the Old Testament, and maybe you haven't thought about this yet, I'm just trying to ask if you have come to a decision, at what point does it become quote real history? Like, is are King David and Solomon fake, or are the prophet? I mean, I know you don't believe they were real prophets, but
no, I don't think King David was a real person. I think Solomon. I don't really know enough about, but it seems like King David might have been just completely made up, and that I don't really hold a firm stance on that either. But there's a lot of mythology there. It's kind of a hard pill to swallow. The thing about King David is that according to biblical timelines, this is one of the things that makes me wonder anyway. According to the biblical timelines, I don't know if you're familiar with the Merneptah stele, but it was it's just a rock, and I can't even remember. I believe it's in Egypt, but it was like a list of the Pharaoh Merneptah's conquests across the land of Canaan in about 1200 BCE, and this would have been smack dab right in the middle of King David's reign, and it talks about their conquest across the land of Canaan, the Pharaoh Merneptah, and he conquered everybody pretty much.
Mhm.
And he lists this is actually the oldest mention of the word Israel on the Merneptah Stele in 1200 BCE. It's our oldest archaeological mention of Israel, and it says, "Israel is laid waste; his seed is no more." And so that doesn't, to me, that doesn't sound like, you know what I mean. If King David was there, they're certainly not telling the real story, because the Egyptians are saying that Israel was laid waste during the time of King David.
Mm.
So something's not lining up, at least at the very. And then
Yeah.
with that plus all of the mythology, it really just makes me question the whole existence in general of King David. But it could have been a real person that was mythologized. But I don't see how there has to be an issue. If he was a real person, then they were wrong about the dating.
Yeah, they could be slightly off. I mean, when you're talking about, centuries, I guess King David would have been. I guess he would have been what? He would have been like 700 BC, maybe. I actually don't know myself.
1200.
Oh, 1200. Yeah. So, I mean, when you're talking that far back, like 100 years is kind of not insignificant. But if let's say the Egyptians might have even 50 years, maybe 60 years, like before David
Yeah.
was around, like that kind of makes a big difference. Like it could have been like the Egyptians did something like that 50 years before David, and then David came 50 years later. I'm just kind of speculating here, obviously.
Yeah, there are definitely ways out of this problem that I'm presenting for sure. I've thought about them too, and like I said,
Okay,
I'm on the fence about this. But it's
right,
if I had a gun to my head, and was King David
right.
a real person, I would choose no.
Okay. All right, let's keep roll. I'm having a lot of thoughts, obviously, but let's just, for the sake of what we've decided to do, keep rolling through the similarities and what you've
Yeah.
written down. Okay, so number 4, they encountered a savage, lawless giant who lived in a cave in the Odyssey, and in Mark, they encountered a savage, lawless demoniac who lived among caves. Okay, anything to say about
Um,
that?
it seemed the only discrepancy was the usage of tomb instead of cave. So I just kind
Hmm.
of had a short answer. The word tomb was likely used instead of cave because of the huge gap in time between the authorship of the Odyssey and Mark. Mark could very well have been reading a later translated version of the Odyssey that replaced the word cave with tomb, given that the Odyssey was written in archaic Greek. It could have also been an intentional and conscious decision to make it more digestible or relatable to a first century audience. I personally don't think this was the reason, as the version that they were likely reading of the Odyssey was I can't even say his name, Aristarchus's version from the 1st and 2nd century BCE. This version is the most recent pre-New Testament version of the Odyssey, and it uses the word cave. Tombs were commonly associated with demons, monsters, evil spirits, or unclean beings across Greco-Roman culture. So it seems most likely to me that this was the reason for the switch from cave to tomb, because it could maintain the fact that it's a cave while applying the negative association with demons and monsters and evil spirits.
Hmm. Okay. All right. Well, I that actually kind of does look like, even without having need to say all that, it could be seen as something of a parallel. So we can go from there. Number 5, Polyphemus, who is the Cyclops in question, was usually depicted as nude, and the demoniac was nude. So my response to this was, first of all, in Mark, the demoniac is not described as nude, so that's incorrect. And also in the Odyssey, the Cyclops is not described as nude. So what do we do here?
All right. So my response is that Dennis didn't say that the Odyssey says that Polyphemus was nude. He said that Polyphemus was usually depicted as nude, which is indeed true in inscriptions on multiple vessels from the 7th century BCE Greece that depict Polyphemus as being nude, as well as all the way into the 2nd century CE in multiple Roman frescoes from Pompeii that depict Polyphemus as being nude. A vast majority of depictions of Polyphemus throughout art depict him as being nude. Mark does depict the demoniac as being nude, but only by implication. After the demoniac is exorcised, it says that the man was, quote, clothed and in his right mind, implying that he was previously not clothed and not in his right mind. The fact that Luke later describes the demoniac as being nude, despite Luke not being a witness to the demoniac and despite Matthew never mentioning nudity, seems to verify that readers of Mark indeed interpreted Mark to be implying the demoniac's nudity.
All right. That's a fair point. All right, number
Okay.
6. Circe
Yep.
recognized Odysseus and asked him not to harm her. Odysseus swore me an oath not to plan another plot to hurt me. The giant asked Odysseus and intended to harm him. Okay, the demoniac in Mark, demoniac recognized Jesus and asked him not to harm him. I adjure you by God, do not torment me.
Mm-hmm. So this was the one where your point was that the stories are too different for it to be a parallel, and the sequence is out of order, which was Dennis's criteria for establishing mimesis. So this is where I addressed the sequence issue.
All right, let's hear that.
The parallel between the two stories is that the hero figure is being begged not to harm or torment a person that is viewed as evil. Again, the differences are what is important here. If Mark were to do a one-to-one copy, it would have been Yahweh begging Jesus not to harm him, which wouldn't have made sense. Instead, Mark seems to have replaced Circe begging with the demons begging, because begging is seen as a submissive and weak act that he wouldn't want associated with the divine figure, which is Yahweh. As for the order, I disagree with Dr. MacDonald here. It is indeed a strong indicator for mimesis, but it certainly isn't required to establish mimesis. Take this as an example. If I told a story where a man bought a shrimp boat and started a shrimp business, then met the president and said that he had to pee, then went to the Vietnam War, then had leg braces and was able to run and break his leg braces, then ran across the entire country just because he felt like running, you would immediately recognize that I'm mimicking Forrest Gump, even though the order is completely wrong. Even if I was to replace the shrimp boat with a crab boat, or say that he went to World War II instead of Vietnam, you would still almost certainly recognize the imitation. The order is completely unnecessary if the parallels are noticeable enough.
That's interesting because even, before you announced it was Forrest Gump, I knew where you were going with that. So that's
I was
actually pretty
wondering it.
interesting.
I'm glad you said
Yeah,
that.
yeah, because I, like a lot of people, I like Forrest Gump, so I was
Me
like
too.
picking up
It's
on
a
that.
banger.
Yeah, that's a good one. Okay, that makes sense. Number 7, the giant asked Odysseus his name, and then in Mark, Jesus asked the demoniac his name. So I guess my response to this was people asking each other's names is again not a significant thing to notice.
Yep, and I agree. My response was, again, it isn't the strength of the parallel, it's the number of parallels, and more specifically, the difference between the parallels. Even if it was something as simple as both of them wearing a blue shirt, it's still a parallel, and it still needs to be added to the list of parallels if we're assessing parallels. If the only parallel was them both asking each other their name, it would be silly to consider that mimesis. That's not what's happening, though. Both stories have them sailing to their destination. Both include the savage that lives in the caves. Both include the hero figure curing the savagery. Both include the exchange of the names. Both names are strange and polar opposites in nature. No Man and Legion. Legion also being a military term for a Roman army, which would be extremely strange for a demon to use. Both include a giant herd of animals on the location where the savage lives. I'm not going to list off all the parallels. I don't know why I wrote all this. Any one of these parallels alone is useless, but where there are this many of them in such a short story, and most of which are in the same order, it simply cannot be dismissed as a coincidence, especially considering that Homer was used to teach the students Greek, and Greek culture had completely flooded Judea for 300 years by that time, and mimesis was happening pretty much everywhere. That's it.
So, is that all of your thoughts on all of them, or is that do you have more on the rest of the supposed parallels?
Yeah, I have thoughts for all of them. A couple of
Okay.
things you agreed on. We're on 9 now. It goes to 17.
Right. So let's go to so 7 and 8 was more. It was about the name, and then obviously they were asked the name, and then an answer was given, which is obviously going to happen as well. So
9 you agreed with.
Okay,
It was the transformation into swine.
Yeah. I think that one that could actually be seen as a parallel.
I agree.
Odysseus subdued the giant with violence and trickery. Circe's magic turned Odysseus' soldiers into... Yeah, I can see how there's a parallel there. So
Yeah.
I think that was only maybe one of the 17 that I thought was reasonable enough.
Mhm.
Okay, so number 10, Polyphemus, the shepherd, called out to his neighbors, and then the swineherds called on their neighbors. What do you have to say about that one?
Your point was that Mark never mentioned the Gerasenes coming to check on the swine. In verse 14, he says, their herdsmen had ran away and reported it in the city and in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. They are in the land of the Gerasenes, so when the herdsmen went to get the locals and bring them back, those locals are the Gerasenes. The Gerasenes are the people that came back to see what had happened. And what had happened, aside from the exorcism, was the herdsmen's entire herd of 2,000 pigs running off a cliff to their death. So they were indeed, at least partially, inquiring about what had happened with the herd. Both stories do indeed depict people calling out to the locals around them for help, and both stories depict the locals coming to inquire about the herd.
Okay. All right, so the next one is also kind of along the same lines. The Cyclops came to the site to ask about Polyphemus' stolen sheep. The Gerasenes came to the site to ask about their swine. Okay.
Mhm.
Uh,
That was,
I
you
get-
grouped 10,
yeah.
10 and 11 together.
Yeah, so I guess my point was that they didn't really ask about the swine in particular. They just asked what happened, right?
Yeah, but what had happened though, like this, yeah, and again, aside from the exorcism, was the swine
So,
running off the cliff. So it's like they
okay.
were asking about both of those things. So in part they were asking about the swine, and I'm sure they were also asking about the exorcism.
Okay.
But given that the herdsmen were the ones that left to go tell the people, I'm sure the swine came up. They just lost 2,000 pigs.
Yeah, right. Okay. All right, so number 12, Odysseus and his crew embarked. Jesus and his crew embarked. I think my response was that, again, if you're sailing to a place, you're going to have to sail away, most likely. I mean, it's
Yeah.
not necessary, but it's, again, not something that is out of the ordinary. So do you have anything to say about that?
I mostly already addressed it, just
Okay,
saying
yeah.
that no matter how strong the parallels are, they need to be listed. Although I do
Okay.
think that's a little pedantic.
Okay. Odysseus told the giant to proclaim that he had blinded him. Jesus told the healed demoniac to proclaim what God had done for him. All right.
Oh, you agreed with this one?
Okay, so there's another one. All right.
Yeah.
So there are 2 out of 13 so far that I
Yeah.
actually thought were significant. All right. So the giant asked Odysseus now aboard the ship to come back. The demoniac asked Jesus now aboard the ship
I'm so sorry.
if he could be. That's fine. If he could be with him.
Yeah. Your point was that Jesus wasn't actually in the boat, and I'm sorry, I'm muting my phone. Jesus wasn't actually in the boat, but rather getting into the boat, and the order of the command of proclamation and the asking of the favor are in reverse order. And my response was, in Jesus's case, it happened as he was getting into the boat. In Odysseus's case, it was just moments later as they were pushing the boat away from shore. That's an extremely insignificant difference, in my opinion. The point is that it happened as they were leaving in the boat. As for the order, I already addressed that earlier.
Okay, right. So Odysseus refused the request. Jesus refused the request. Okay.
You said the wording is different, the literary style is different, and the order is all out of whack. My response was, the wording is never the same in mimesis. It's always reworded. The literary style being different is likely a result of it being written nearly 1,000 years later. The order is the same in both stories. The refusal came immediately after the request, though again, I don't think the order is important.
Okay. Odysseus and his crew sailed away. Jesus and his disciples sailed away. I feel like you might have already covered that in some of your other comments, but you can say what you want here.
Yeah, it was addressed by the first one.
Right. Okay, Odysseus awoke during a tempest. in the episode immediately following the story of the Cyclops, and then in Mark, Jesus awoke during a tempest and calmed the wind and sea just before the exorcising the demoniac. Okay.
Yep. And I covered that part earlier when I mentioned the storm, about how Jesus was able to sleep during the storm and was able to calm the storm with his own power instead of calling on Circe. So it was like a glorification difference.
Okay.
So my conclusion, I'll just read that and then I'll be finished here. It's not the way that it's worded or in individual details of the story. It's the overall message. Mimesis isn't a one-to-one copy, and in almost all cases, the imitation is extremely different from the original. Each parallel by itself may seem insignificant, but at the end of the day, both stories depict a hero character sailing to a land where a savage lives in a cave. Both stories include a giant herd of farm animals. Both Mark and contemporary Greek art of the Odyssey depict the savage as nude. Both stories depict the hero being begged for mercy. Both stories have them exchanging names with the savage, having a strange and opposite name. Both stories depict groups of people being turned into pigs. Both stories include the hero awakening during a storm. Both stories have the hero telling the cured savage to proclaim that they had changed them. Both stories include locals coming to inquire about the herd, and both stories include the cured savage asking the hero to be united with them as the hero is leaving on the boat. This many parallels, regardless of order or other differences in the story, seems beyond impossible that it could be a coincidence. And the fact that these Homeric epics were known by essentially anyone that could read and write Greek, as well as the fact that syncresis and mimesis and polemics were commonplace across most religious documents and mythologies throughout history, it makes it even less likely that it was a coincidence. In my opinion, the sequencing isn't as important as Dennis makes it out to be, even though many of these parallels were indeed in the same order. The differences are fundamental to, and the most important part of syncretic mimesis, and are seemingly intentional. The differences are typically what contain the message, which in this case would be that Jesus doesn't need Circe to do magic because he has the divine power of God within him. I think that the parallels between Mark 5 and the Odyssey are perfectly clear and completely intentional, and this example from Mark 5 is one of dozens of examples that Dr. McDonald has documented, which I've been sort of diving into lately.
Okay. All right, so I guess a number of questions arise about this, and I'm not going to ask them in any particular order, but I'll just...
All right.
One thing I'd like to ask is, and I might be wrong about this, but it seems like in the approximately 2,000 years since the Gospel of Mark was written, a little bit less, but about that, no one else seems to have made explicit mention of this mimesis between Mark and the Homeric epics before Dr. McDonald. So don't you think that's a bit suspicious if it's so recognizable that for 2,000 years, no one really seemed to be explicitly call this out and say that this is something they think is happening? Like, how do you feel about that?
It's yeah, you're absolutely right. It's shocking to me too. I was in disbelief when you brought that point up and began researching to find people who have drawn these parallels, and nobody has, except for, of course, the Dionysus parallels between the Gospel of John and Euripides Bacchae. Other than that, this stuff with Mark that he's pointing out in Luke and Acts and Matthew, nobody has ever noticed that. And I don't know. I think there's a lot of reasons or potential reasons for that. I guess one of which could be that it's been a heretical view to even talk about that for a vast majority of history, and the punishment could be as severe as death. So it's certainly career ending at the very least. Another reason is that most biblical scholars throughout history, even now, are religious, and many of them are biased from their religion. And maybe some of them have noticed it and are just not acknowledging it openly because of their religion. And then another reason that Dennis brings up is that the Homeric epics were written in archaic Greek, and that the parallels are, much more noticeable with the language. And so a lot of people that are into biblical studies aren't, they don't learn the archaic form of Greek when they learn Greek.
Okay.
So it wouldn't stand out quite as much to them. And then
One
also
thing-
most biblical, I was just going to add, most biblical scholars also aren't like extremely well versed in Homeric epics to the point of like memorization. And also one more thing, most time mimetics critical scholars that are looking for mimesis in the New Testament are always looking to the Old Testament for mimesis. Those are his points.
Yeah, I guess. I guess my thought is that it's not that these parallels aren't there. It's in some cases, or that they can't. There's no evidence that there is mimesis going on. I guess my point is that when you look at some of how this is being presented on like Myth Vision podcast and some of these other skeptical YouTube channels, it's like undeniable proof that Mark did this. Do you hold that
sensationalized?
Okay, so my opinion is that while this is an interesting theory and it's certainly possible, perhaps plausible, I don't believe it, but some of these people are making it seem like once you see this, it's just there's no reason to go back. You can't go back. But to me, it's like it's very speculative.
Well, I guess my only response to that, because like I when I hear these parallels, I feel the way that they feel. You know what I mean? I feel like there's no way that this could happen by a coincidence. This literally had to be intentional. The statistical chances of this happening by coincidence must just be mind-blowing. And apparently they're doing this dozens of times throughout the New Testament. And not only that, all cultures were doing this to everyone's religion. So it's like, it seems very likely that this is actually what's going on to me. So I think just different people interpret this evidence in completely different ways. But to be fair, they, Derek from Myth Vision and Dennis McDonald and Robin Faith Walsh and Richard C. Miller and Richard Carrier, those are some scholars that hold these same views that Dennis do about Homer. They're way more advanced. You know what I mean? If there are dozens of parallels, I only know 2 or 3 of them. And so they have a way bigger picture of how significant this is than we do, I think. And maybe that's why they're so they're so gung-ho about like presenting it as a fact, because they've seen all of the evidence.
Well, another thing, I think here's something I think that muddies the waters.
Mm-hmm.
See, in my opinion, the Book of Acts does in fact seem to whoever wrote it. I don't believe Luke wrote the Book of Acts. Whoever wrote the Gospel of Luke did not write the Book of Acts. But the author of the Book of Acts does seem to be a big fan of Greek classical literature. Again, when I say classical, I'm talking about from our vantage point and perspective.
Mm-hmm.
But they would have been known in his time, and they would have been, very popular. So I think what muddies the waters here is that perhaps Dennis McDonald sees this, and then it kind of creates this lens where maybe the rest of the Gospels are doing this. Whereas, to me, the author of the Book of Acts kind of stands alone, and what Dennis McDonald is extrapolating too far. He's colored he sees it somewhere, and thus he's kind of seeing it everywhere. Is kind of what I think might be going on with him.
That could be true. I need to. There's so much to it. Like I need to look into this stuff deeper. I've really only, the other parallels that I've looked into were between the Dionysus parallels between the Gospel of John and Euripides, which I found even more convincing than this demoniac story. And then the Luke, not Luke, Acts. I guess apparently Luke too, but the thing I was listening to him talk about was the Book of Acts, and there seemed to be some really strong, nearly as significant as this demoniac story parallels.
Let me there's another problem. Faithful Apologetics, I want to get to you soon, but I do want to
Yeah,
kind
I'm
of.
sorry as well. I didn't
No,
realize how long that was going to be.
no, this is fine because we have a little bit of time. I do want to cover this because this is something that's clearly influenced it, on a global scale. Maybe not that many people, but a significant number of
Mhm.
people. Tens of thousands of people seem to find this idea convincing, and some of them are well-credentialed scholars. So it's worth looking at. One of the most shocking aspects of this theory that Dennis McDonald is putting forward is the idea that not only did Mark do this, but that he wanted his potential readers to see these parallels
That I'm
upon.
skeptical of.
Right. See, that to me doesn't make sense. And the reason for that, and I know you probably know where I'm going, but I do want to lay this out. I think that if you want people to embrace your newly created religion, the last thing you want them to do is know that it's been fabricated from previous mythologies. Like you
Yeah.
want them to believe that it's something real, that it, especially in that time frame when I do believe that in the early phases of Christianity there was a serious persecution that happened. Now, I know that's been called into question by some scholars, but to me, I do think it was at least dangerous, if not life-threatening, for the early Christians to be Christians. So
Oh,
if
definitely.
people are gonna, yeah, if people are gonna put their lives on the line for something, you're not gonna put your life on the line for a mimesis of Homer's epics,
Yeah.
So
The thing is that a majority of the martyr claims come from Luke and Acts, and that's what, you know what I mean. To me, for me anyway, that's what kills so much of the credibility of that whole idea, and also like, I don't know. There's more to it that I can't remember. I shouldn't speak on it until I've looked into it more. Something about the story being misinterpreted about them actually not. It wasn't because they weren't killed because they wouldn't let go of their faith. It was for another reason. And then there's another one where it's like people say that they did get killed, but then like when you read the story, it clearly shows them rejecting their faith to save their lives. So it's like I've seen a lot of things that take away credence for that, but the fact that the majority of the claims are in Luke and Acts, I find that Luke and Acts to be not true at all. Not to mention Luke was not even a witness.
yeah, I think the scholarship is a little bit behind when it comes to Luke. I think that for me, to me, it's very clear that the author of the Gospel of Luke and the author of the Book of Acts are different people. I think there's
Yeah.
different writing. I think there's different writing styles, and I think there's different the content, the internal. I hate to say this, inconsistencies tell me that the Gospel of Luke and the Book of Acts have different authors. So
That's interesting because
yeah,
I've never heard. Well, I mean, I have heard that obviously, but like in the circle of scholarship that I listen to, including Dr. McDonald, actually, they all seem to think that they were the same person.
yeah, and I think that even in secular scholarship, they do still kind of attach themselves, not all of them obviously, but
To consensus.
to the original traditional presentation of Christianity, just because that's what's been around for so long. Like,
I know it makes me
so
cringe. It makes me
yeah,
cringe, brother. I see it, and I think like there's some of the justifications for some of the they're using certain facts about people to establish new facts, but the justifications for those original facts that they're holding to is so damn weak to begin with, and it's like
right,
we're really jumping to conclusions here.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so maybe just a couple more thoughts I have about this whole idea of one thing to me that really strikes me as problematic is that in Mark you have 20 verses of very direct language, not florid, not poetic. And in the Odyssey, the sequences in question are you have the Cyclops, and it goes all the way to a couple other locations, and then to the island of Circe, or where Circe is.
Mhm.
And it's just like I mean, even I'm not a literary critic or anything, but it's a masterpiece. It's very decorative language, and it's a well
I
thought
agree.
out story. So, we lost Faithful Apologetics. I was literally like within minutes of getting to him. I don't know if he's going to come back or not. Maybe that's him in the private chat right there.
Yeah, it is.
Oh, okay. Well, that's unfortunate. But okay. Well, if no one else joins, then we can talk about other things or continue to talk about this, or we can just agree to go do whatever. But there he is. Okay. Hey, Faithful, how's it going? I just wanted to. Do you gotta go or something? You're muted, by the way. I want to let you know you're muted.
Oh, I'm here.
Yeah. Are you like pressed for time or something, or do you like do you have a little bit more time? What's your status?
A little bit more time.
Okay, I wanna talk to you as well because I had also had a conversation with you earlier. So Andy, well, I appreciate your thoughts. I wish we could. I honestly, I feel like this topic we could talk about it for hours and hours because I think it's very fascinating.
I
guess
think just
go
if
ahead,
I could just add one more thing before we quit talking about it.
Yeah.
It seems that as far as like the literary style and stuff being so different, and the contents being shorter and the differences, what it seems like from the way Dennis is putting it is that this is coming from, like, they're copying Virgil, because apparently Virgil is a copy of the Odyssey and the Iliad. The first 6 books of Virgil are copying the Odyssey, and the last 6 books of the Iliad are copying the Iliad. Jesus Christ. Virgil's Aeneid is what I was trying to say, is copying the Odyssey and the Iliad. The first 6 for the Odyssey, the last 6 for the Iliad.
Mm-hmm.
And what Dennis is saying is that these Mark and Luke and Acts aren't copying from Homer himself. He thinks that they're copying what Virgil did when he copied Homer.
Oh, interesting.
So I think that reading Virgil's Aeneid might put a lot of this into perspective. But we can move on now.
Okay. Yeah, to me, and I'll just kind of throw some thoughts in there. I don't, I know, to me, like, I just think the most likely explanation is that we have Mark, and this again, I'm not saying that I'm definitely correct, but just my opinion when I assess everything and all the claims and arguments that Dr. McDonald's putting forward, it seems to me like the most likely explanation is Mark is really just writing down what he believes is true history based on what he's heard from Peter. And there are similarities, certainly, between coincidences, some of them odd coincidences, but you're dealing with a culture that believed in demonic possession and where people were sailing around and, people asking each other's names and stuff. And it's just, I don't know, to me, and also with the literary, with Mark, if you want to replace a cultural influence with something you're creating of your own for whatever reasons, whatever your motivations may be, you don't want to do a worse job from a literary standpoint than the people who went before you. So, because people are going to be like, well, the original is better, so why should we pay attention to this new garbage? Like, so these just, I mean, I'm not calling Mark garbage, but what I'm saying is Mark wasn't trying to write something that would be known for its literary qualities. He was trying to write down historical events, so he was writing them in a way that just told what happened. Even though, we can deny that they actually did happen, I'm just saying that it seems to me Mark probably did believe them, and that it was written in such a way that he's just trying to relate events. He's not trying to mimic anything. He's not trying to create literary rhetoric or anything like that. And a lot of the 17 parallels, I think a lot of them can be explained as just like, people are just doing things that would be very common in that time frame, like sailing around, asking each other their names and stuff. I don't know. It's, in any case, I think it's and another point I wanted to make is that the falsifiability aspect of, according to mimesis, you're creating parallels, but at the same time there are differences. So
Yep.
how do you go about disproving something where the differences actually prove the parallels? So That's another point that I thought.
That was where he brings in sequencing, and again, this could be a reason why sequencing could be important, and I think it helps this argument because most of it is in the same order. But typically when there are differences, they either glorify or demonize characters in like a way that you would expect. You know what I mean? Whoever's the hero of the new story is being glorified in the difference, and that happens in almost every difference in these.
Okay. All right, Andy. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to respond to everything. I will absolutely think about everything you said. I unfortunately, just because of time, I want to.
Yeah, no problem.
Because Faithful Apologetics has been waiting very patiently, which I respect. So I'm going to respect him and talk with him a little bit. But we will talk again. So thank you for that presentation and going through all that with us.
No problem.
All right. I'm gonna remove you, Andy. Don't feel. I'm just
no. Go ahead.
We'll talk another time, though. Hopefully,
all right.
If you
Take
decide
care.
to join. Thank you. All right, Faithful. Are you there?
Yup.
Okay, good. Sorry about that. First of all, thank you so much for. There's a. Oh, okay. I muted you because when you're unmuted, I can hear myself. I can hear a very strong echo. It's kind of hard to concentrate, so I just muted you when you're not talking. Just wanted to let you know that. But did you have anything that you wanted to discuss in particular, or did you just want to? What did you have in mind? Anything?
How about Acts 9?
Acts 9. Okay, let's go there. Hold on. Let me get there. Let's go to Acts 9. So you want to? What you're saying is you want to talk about Paul. Is that what you wanted to do?
Yes.
Okay, good. Yeah, I'd be happy to do that. Let's go to Acts 9. And what exactly in Acts 9 did you want to talk about?
Oh, the conversion of Saul.
Okay, let's read that. All right, so let's start in verse 3. As he was traveling, it happened that he was approaching. I'm going to mute you. So sorry about that. The echo is still there. As he was traveling, it happened that, and this is obvious. Okay, so let's just start in verse 1. Now Saul, still breathing threats of murder against the disciples of the Lord, went to the high priest and asked for letters from him to the synagogues at Damascus, so that if he found any belonging to the way, both men and women, he might bring them bound to Jerusalem. As he was traveling, it happened that he was approaching Damascus, and suddenly a light from heaven flashed around him. And he fell to the ground and heard a voice saying to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" And he said, "Who are you, Lord?" And he said, "I am Jesus whom you are persecuting. But get up and enter the city, and it will be told you what you must do." The men who traveled with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but seeing no one. Saul got up from the ground, and though his eyes were open, he could see nothing. And leading him by the hand, they brought him to Damascus. And he was 3 days without sight, and neither ate nor drank. Okay, and here it is. Let's skip to verse 13. But Ananias answered, "Lord, I have heard from many about this man, how much harm he did to your saints at Jerusalem. And here he has authority from the chief priest to bind all who call on your name." But the Lord said to him, "Go, for he is a chosen instrument of mine to bear my name before the Gentiles and kings and the sons of Israel. For I will show him how much he must suffer for my name's sake." So let me ask you this. Do you think that the Acts 9 proves that Paul is a real apostle of Jesus Christ? Is that kind of...
Yeah, I believe so, because it tells you that Christ went face to face with Saul. I mean, not face to face, like mouth to mouth and stuff, but an intimate conversation, because it starts
Right.
off with Jesus talking to Saul.
Okay.
and you can
All
see the
right.
voice, introduce itself as Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
So this gets into a fundamentally different approach to the Bible that you and I have, faithful apologetics. And I just want to say, I first of all, I appreciate the fact that you care about these things, and I believe you love Jesus and God, and you want to do the right thing. The thing we got to realize, though, oh, we got Dirty Varmint back there. Sorry about that. How you doing, Dirty Varmint?
Pretty good. Pretty good.
Good to see you. Yeah, I'll let you get your thoughts, and let me get my thoughts in, Dirty Varmint, and then you can share as well. One thing we have to do, faithful apologetics, and again, I'm going to mute you or whoever's. I'm going to mute everybody just so I can get my. I don't know who's echoing there, but when it comes to discovering the truth of Christianity and what it is we believe and what we should believe, okay, we can't just presuppose things. For instance, what exactly? Like one thing I want Christians to understand is when it comes to our approach to the Bible, why is it that we look at the Bible as what defines our Christian religion and faith? Well, believe it or not, and this may surprise you, faithful apologetics, the reason is because the Bible was created by the Catholic Church in its current form. And then after that, it was only then that the entire Bible was seen as what defines Christianity. Okay, this is actually just plain history. It's undeniable that the Catholic Church. Now you can say the Catholic Church was guided by God and their councils and things like that, but the fact is that when we look at the Book of Acts, we need to think about this really early before the Catholic Church created the Bible, which is around the year 400 AD. The Book of Acts wasn't necessarily seen as something that was authoritative to Christianity or to the Christian faith. All right. It was only once this kind of so-called canon had been put in place that the Book of Acts became like this sacred part of Christianity that no one can question. But really, we need to look at this and think, what is the essence of our faith? Is the Book of Acts like something we just take without questioning and accept the narratives within it without asking if they fit within the whole? You see what I'm saying, faithful? What I'm trying to say is that we need to, when it comes to restructuring Christianity, we need to question what has been handed down to us by tradition. And in my opinion, because Paul is so problematic, and because the Book of Acts makes him into an apostle of Jesus Christ to the Gentiles, that immediately calls into question the Book of Acts. So what do you think about that?
Well, what I believe about the canon is I believe the canon is made right. Because here's the thing. Because us throughout the Bible, like the books actually connect to each other. Or like whether you believe in them or not, like you can see some verses quote another book, and you can also see throughout scripture that there's a connection shit in scripture. So what do you think about that?
Let me, well, before I answer, because I definitely have an answer, Dirty Varmint, do you have any thoughts at this particular moment, or do you are you just kind of listening in?
Well, I mean, I kind of came up because you guys got on the topic of Acts 9, and I got like 5 what I see as red flags with the whole encounter with Jesus. I was wondering if I
Yeah.
could.
Yeah, let's go through. Let's talk about, so Dirty Varmint. What are you seeing? What are the problems you're seeing with X9 in the narrative here? So let's run through this, and then I will I will respond to Faithful's question in a moment. But what are you seeing, Dirty Varmint?
Well, like the first red flag, I think, is where he blinded Paul. Jesus blinded Paul. And to me, that's a big red flag because in the Old Testament and even in the New Testament, I mean, it prophesies that the Messiah is going to give sight to the blind. And that's what Jesus did during his lifetime. He gave sight, he cured blindness, physical blindness. And so the idea that Jesus blinded a human being, that's a big red flag for me because, I mean, for obvious reasons.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
That's just the first one. I see that's like a clue. It's like a red flag. And like the second one is kind of the idea that Jesus taught that in order to get forgiveness, you have to repent first. And in this story, we see Paul is on his way to murder Christians or kidnap them or whatever. He hasn't repented first, but it just says suddenly Jesus appeared, or a light appeared from heaven, and he treated Paul as if he's forgiven,
That's an interesting point.
So that's
it's
number
like,
2. Yeah.
So let me add to that. So basically, Paul is still in a state of being in rebellion against God. He's being evil, and then somehow, like, he's in his state of disobedience, and even in that state, Jesus just kind of like basically anoints him as an apostle to the Gentiles. So you think that's kind of strange that Jesus would act like that?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So there's 2. All right. Go ahead.
The third one is where Paul says, "Who are you? Who are you, Lord?" And Jesus, there's other passages in the New Testament, I think it's in John, where he says, "My sheep will know me." So, I mean, if that's true, then Paul couldn't have been a sheep.
Right. Yeah, that's logical. Okay, so there's 3.
That's 3. Okay. The next part is where Jesus says, "I'm Jesus." And I believe that contradicts Matthew 24:5 when he says, "Many false Christs will come in my name, claiming I'm the Christ and I'm he." So here we have an example of someone claiming to be the Christ, where Jesus says, "Do not believe them." He says, "Many false Christs will rise, performing many signs and miracles." See that it says, Luke 21:8 says, "See to it that you are not deceived. For many will come in my name, claiming I am he, and the time is near. Do not follow them."
Okay.
So I think the phrase "I am Jesus," that's a forbidden phrase. Nobody's allowed to use that. Nobody's allowed to claim to be Jesus until the second coming.
This could be some demonic entity claiming to be Jesus.
Right, because it doesn't actually say who the entity is. It just says a voice. So whoever's voice that is, it isn't Jesus. I think these red flags are making it clear that it can't be Jesus.
I did not notice that.
Yeah. Did you have any more, Dirty Varmint?
I think that was it. I think it's 4.
Okay. All right. So, and let me add one more to that list then. There's an interesting aspect to this that many people have noticed. It says here, "The men who traveled with him stood speechless, hearing the voice, but seeing no one." So that's verse. So the men around Paul or Saul, whatever you want to call him, heard the voice, but saw no one. I'm gonna mute you, Faithful. Sorry, while I'm talking. I'm not doing that to silence you. I'm just trying to. You have a little bit of an echo there that's causing me a problem.
That's good.
But if you go to Acts, I believe it's 20. Yeah, 22. Where is it? And he said, "Who are you?" And if you read verse 9 and 22, it says, "And those who were with me saw the light, but did not understand the voice of the one who was speaking to me." So it seems to be a little bit of a contradiction here, where in the original narrative of 9, they didn't see anything, but they heard. But here, it looks like they saw the light, but did not hear. So that's another a little bit of a question.
Yeah. And there's another little one like that. It's in the first account it says they stood speechless. All his companions stood speechless. And then in another passage, it says that they all fell to the ground. So did they stand speechless or did they fall to the ground? I mean,
Oh, there it is right there. Yeah. Right. So the thing is, Dirty Varmint, I think Faithful is still in a place where he's not going to question the validity of a biblical text. So we kind of have to get him to a point where he acknowledges that that's something that might be necessary to come to true Christianity. So what do you have any thoughts up to this point? You have and you go ahead. Go ahead. Is there anything that's
for Faithful, right?
yeah, Faithful? Do you have any thoughts as of this now, or did you want to try to refute anything or make any comments, Harlem?
I'm
Are you
gonna
just
be honest.
are you just listening at this point? Are you just kind of like hearing things out?
Yeah, I'm gonna be honest. I actually didn't know any of this stuff.
Right. Okay. Well, good, because I'm not. Here's the thing, Harlem. I'm not someone who's going to sit here and say you must agree with me or I'm going to banish you from my. No, I'm not like that. All I'm doing is saying here is some information for you. You don't necessarily have to agree with me right this minute or ever, but it is beneficial for you to know this so that you can make an informed decision on your own as you think about this. So let me get some more for you, because again, this is just in the mode of presenting information for you. All right. Who was it who gave the Israelites the law on Mount Sinai? Do you remember? Faithful? You're
Can
muted,
you
by the
hear me
way.
still?
Yeah, you're muted. Oh, yeah. Who gave the law on Mount Sinai? You're muted. Harlem, you're muted. You're still muted.
Oh, sorry. It's my brother in the background. Yeah. So what were you saying?
So again, we're in the mode of presenting information to you so that you can make an informed decision. Do you remember who it was who gave the law to Moses on Mount Sinai? Can you answer that question?
Well, I believe that it was an angel representing God.
Do you do? Now, why do you? What? So, all right. Well, let's go back to Exodus, and we can go to Moses on Sinai. So, where does the Exodus narrative say that it was an angel? You're muted.
I believe it's Acts 7 verse 53.
No, I'm asking about in Exodus. Where does it say in Exodus that it was an angel?
I'm gonna be honest for sure. I've read Exodus, but I don't know where it is for sure. That's what I'm
Yeah.
gonna say.
Okay. Well, let's look at it. Are you able to listen to me? Because it sounds to me like you're being like harassed by your family members. Is that correct?
No.
Oh, it's not. Okay, you can hear what I'm saying.
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. So this is what you need to know, faithful. Yeah, and I am going to mute you while I am talking, just because. Sorry, I know this is really a pain, but it's kind of necessary. So is this Exodus 19, where this is the Exodus 20 is where the law is given. Moses went up to God, and the Lord called to him from the mountain, saying, "Thus shall you say to the house of Israel." Okay. Now then, if you will indeed obey my voice and keep my covenant, then you shall be my own possession among all the peoples. So I'm going to scroll down, and it's all about the Lord Yahweh. Okay, so Exodus 19 through 20. Again, we're just looking, we're scanning. I don't see anything. We get the Lord visits Sinai. The Mount Sinai was in smoke because the Lord descended upon it. Okay, so nothing about angels. This is the Lord. This is Yahweh. That when it says the Lord in the Old Testament in these places, this is all reference to Yahweh. This is God. I don't see anything of angel. Okay, so we go to Exodus 20, and then the Exodus 20 is where you get the 10 Commandments, and it says, "Then God spoke all these words." Now, is God an angel, Harlem?
No, God is not a angel or a creature.
Right, exactly. So it says, God spoke all these words, saying, I am the Lord your God who brought you. You shall have no other. And then it goes into the 10 Commandments. But like you said, if you go to Acts chapter 7, verse 51, scroll down to verse 51 here. Or which one was it? Was it 51? Oh, 53. 53. Yeah, 53. You who received the law as ordained by angels and yet did not keep it. So we have a really huge problem here, Harlem, where Exodus tells us that God was the one who ordained the law. And in Acts, it tells us it was ordained by angels. Here's the problem. It can't be both. It's just not possible. Okay, so one of the two books is false. All right, because God is not an angel, and God certainly isn't multiple angels, like it says here. All right, so why does the book of Acts say that it was given by angels when the book of Exodus said it was God, very God? You see what I'm saying? So this is again a question we need to ask ourselves.
My brain is spinning right now. I'm gonna be honest with you.
Right. And again, you don't have to answer these questions. I'm just asking them to you because these are things you need to think about because these are important questions. This is we want to believe what's true, not what's tradition, not what makes us feel good. If you go to Exodus 31 and you go to wait, where is it? Yeah, it says here in verse 18 from Exodus 31, when he had finished speaking with him upon Mount Sinai, he gave Moses tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone written by the finger of God. So there's really no way around it. God is not an angel. The 10 Commandments were given. The law was given by God. But Acts chapter 7, verse 53 said it was given by angels. So we have a huge problem here.
I think Exodus 33:11 also says the Lord spoke to Moses face to face as a man speaks with his friend.
All right, let's go take a look at that. Exodus 31. Exodus what?
33:11.
Let's read it. All right. Thus, the Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, just as a man speaks with his friend. Yep, there it is. So we have the original testament, as I call it, telling us that it was God, very God, that gave Moses the law. But we have Acts saying it was given by angels. Now, here's something else for you, Harlem, to think about. Who wrote Galatians?
Paul.
And Paul did, right? So if we go down to where is it? Hold on, let me find it. Okay, if we're in Galatians chapter 3, I'm right here. I'm in Galatians chapter 3, verse 19. Why the law then? So that law refers to the law given to Moses on Mount Sinai. You can read that. It's up. You can read Galatians 3 yourself. I'll just let you figure. But here it is. Why the law then? It was added because of transgressions, having been ordained through angels by the agency of a mediator. Now, that mediator is Moses. So Paul also somehow believes, and is teaching right here, that the law given to Moses was ordained through angels, even though the original Testament clearly says it was given by God, written by the very finger of God. So why does Paul believe and teach that the law was given by angels? This is another very serious question. Why does Paul believe this? Why does he say this? Why does he not believe what the original Testament says, which is that God gave the law? Okay? So, again, these are very, for me, this is a big problem because, again, it can't all be correct. If the original Testament is correct, which is what most people call the Old Testament, if it's correct, then God gave the law, and God is not an angel, as you already, as we just saw. It all says that God was the one who gave the law. God gave the law. God spoke to Moses. God wrote it down. God spoke to Moses face to face. Then all of a sudden, you get to Acts. Oh, the law was ordained by angels. You get to Paul in Galatians chapter 3, verse 19. Oh, the law was ordained by... You know why? You know one reason they might want to teach you that the law was ordained by angels, Jill? Excuse me, Faithful? See, Jill's back there. Why do you think they might want to... why do you think they might want to teach you that the law was ordained by angels, Faithful? What is? Can you think of a reason? You're muted, by the way. Harlem, can you hear me? You're muted. You're still muted. I just need to confirm that you can hear what I'm saying. Testing 1, 2, 3. Harlem, can you hear me? I don't know. Did he get raptured or something? Harlem, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so why do you think Paul and the book of Acts might... I see you, Jill. I will let you up in a minute, but let me have a conversation with Harlem here. Why do you think... what do you think is the reason that they might have been doing this?
I don't know for sure. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't know.
Let me answer for you. Let's look in Galatians chapter 1. If you look in chapter 1 and verse 8, it says this: "But if we or an angel from heaven should preach to you a gospel contrary to what we have preached, he is to be accursed." So let's try to put the puzzle pieces together. The law was given by angels. And if the angels teach you something different than what I, Paul, am teaching you, that angel is to be accursed. So what's going on here? Let me just try to tie all this together. What Paul is trying to do is say that little law given by angels is nothing compared to what I'm telling you right now. I'm telling you that salvation is by the gift of grace. It's not of works, lest any man should boast. Those angels want to try and convince you that their little law is of works, and you don't have, they want you to be burdened by all these things that God's telling you to do. And I'm saying that you're saved by grace through faith. So what they want to do is they want to take the law down a notch. They want to say that law wasn't given by God. It was given by, puny little angels. And I'm, but they're preaching a different gospel than I'm preaching to you. So you don't have to worry about that anymore.
Yeah, it's pretty messed up, man.
That could be what's going on. faithful. Again, it just seems to be if you tie all the puzzle pieces together. Now, also one thing, I'm gonna cite one more thing here, and then maybe we'll bring Jill up and see if he can behave. Hold on, let me see if I can find it. Oops, wrong.
Hey, Jill, better bring that
Here.
verse. Go ahead.
Yeah, so in verse, this is. Oh, we lost Harlem. Harlem, did you lose your connection? All right, he's gone. I did not kick him. I did not boot him. He just disappeared. So I don't know what's going on with him. What's going on, Jill?
Hey, how's it going?
I'm all right.
What's up, man?
Hey, you seem rather eager to ask your questions to Faithful. Let's see.
Yeah, did you have any thoughts on them, Jill?
Yeah, what was your issue with Galatians 3? I can help you for sure. I
It
can help
says
you
the
with all
law
of your
was ordained by
theological-
angels.
Yeah,
I
so
can help you with all your theological problems,
Let's, all right, well,
which is why you avoid me, by the way.
Well, now is your chance to answer the question. So we just showed that the book of Acts and whoever wrote Galatians, I guess it was Paul, said that the law was ordained by angels when Exodus says it was God. So how do you explain that?
Show us the text, please. Show us Galatians.
I was just looking this up because I wonder why some people said that it was ordained by angels. And so I looked it up and I said, does the Talmud say that it was ordained by angels? And then Google says,
let's not waste time.
Hold on. The Talmud says, the Talmud does not, I mean, Google says, the Talmud does not. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, let's not waste time gish galloping and going off on tangents. Galatians 3. Can you go to Galatians 3? Let's actually read the text.
Here. Yeah, Galatians 3:19.
Okay.
Right.
And
all right. So Galatians 3:19.
What version of the Bible are you reading?
Does it matter?
No, it doesn't. So I'm just asking.
It's the NASB, 1995.
NASB. Okay. Why the law then? It was added because of transgressions, having been ordained through angels by the agency of a mediator. Through angels.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Clearly telling you how the law was administered.
Through angels?
Preposition. Through the angels.
It was ordained through angels.
Yes, by a mediator. It didn't say ordained. You added that to the text.
What's that?
It never says ordained.
It says it right there.
It says administered.
No, it literally. I'm not sure which version of the NASB you're reading. It's literally on the screen. It says ordained right there in the middle. I'm highlighting it.
Yeah, well, if you look that word up in the Greek there, ordained just simply means to announce. That's all.
Yeah,
and that's the problem. It doesn't matter. Yeah, that's a huge problem.
So they're just announcing. They're not ordaining. God.
So you're saying that it was an angel who gave the 10 Commandments on Mount Sinai?
No, it just says here that we're not talking about Mount Sinai. Let's concentrate on what we're reading.
Well, that's when the law was ordained.
It says here that it was announced. That's all.
By the way, the King James version also uses the word ordained. Apparently, all right. Let's just say the Greek word means announced. That doesn't help you because the law. I just went through how Exodus 19, Exodus 20, Exodus 31, and Exodus 33 all say God was speaking to Moses face by face, writing down the law with his finger and announcing the law directly to Moses. So how is that ordained by angels?
Okay, it says it was administered or giving orders through the angels. So in the spiritual realm, well, let me answer. In the spiritual realm, God does things through the angels. He sends messengers. He sends war angels. He does things through the angels, just like when he sends Michael to wipe out, hordes of men in battle. So things happen through the angels. Things happen through humans. They're vessels. That's all the text is communicating.
Yeah, but was the law through an angel? Was it announced to the people
all
through an angel?
Everything is through it. When God dispatches an angel, we read about this in the book of is that where God dispatches
But it
the
says
angel?
God spoke to him face to face. So how's that an angel?
Right. Well, in the text, he does speak to him face to face.
Yeah, in
The
Exodus.
The Ten Commandments are given. The
by
Ten Commandments
God.
are given directly from God's hand.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right,
and his
that's the
voice.
But that's
right
not all
before.
of the law. The Ten Commandments is not all of the law. So you're trying to mash all of the law into the Ten Commandments.
Jill,
That's not the
what?
case.
Okay, let me ask you this: what part of the law was given by angels? Is there any place
The
in
part
the
that
original
came
Testament
through
where it says?
the text says right there. It's right there, sir.
Wait, no, I want to
Administered
go back.
through angels
Yeah, which
by
law?
a mediator. So a mediator would be an announcer
All right,
or
if I
someone
wanted
who
to,
is a go-between.
well, Jill, if I wanted to
according
see
to the
evidence
Greek.
of this, if I wanted to see evidence of this in the original Testament, where would I look? Which
The
verse?
original Testament. What do you need the original Testament for? I mean,
That's
the
what
idea
we're
that God.
about.
Well, we're talking about Galatians 3:19. The idea that God
Galatians
dispatches,
3:19 says the Old Testament law was administered by angels and
right,
not
and that's
God.
that's not the Ten Commandments. The Ten
All
Commandments
right,
was
so I'm
administered
asking
by
you.
God.
I'm asking
You're
you.
trying to smash all of the law into the 10.
Jill, I'm asking for any of the 613 that was given by an angel, any one of them. Where can I look?
No, it doesn't say they were given. It says it through the angel. Through, the word there is through. That
No,
word in the Greek is a preposition.
What I'm trying to say to you is
the channel.
Everywhere, there is nowhere I see in the original Testament where any part of the law is administered or ordained or announced through an angel. It's always Yahweh.
Well, it's a spiritual realm. Things happen in the spiritual realm before they happen in the real realm.
Okay,
we learn about this, that God dispatches angels in various ways.
But you're admitting there's no evidence of this in the OT. All right,
Yes, there is. It says it right there in Galatians. It says through angels.
That is not the whole point here. Is that Paul is lying? He's making things up.
Oh, Paul's lying now. Okay. Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Well, that's clearly what the text says. So we can't try to turn that into ordained because the word ordained is used.
King James did, and
right, because the word ordained doesn't necessarily mean in the sense that God is ordaining. When we say God is ordaining something, he's doing it from eternity past. The word ordained there in the Greek doesn't mean eternity past. If you look it up in the Greek,
it means ordinance, command, or arrangement.
Right. It means to give orders to.
Yeah, so you're saying that God told an angel to give the laws to Moses, and then Moses gave the laws to the people. Is that what you're saying?
No, it doesn't necessarily have to be when it says.
Yeah, because it says through a mediator. Moses is the mediator. And he's saying that God gave the law, or not that God, but it's some rogue angel gave these laws to Moses, and they're inferior, and that's why we can throw them away. That's what Paul's trying to say here.
No, it could be a Christophany. It could be an angel sent to protect, or the angel of Yahweh, the Christophanies we see in the Old Testament. It could be an angel sent to assist, but it's still God who is ordaining the act. God ordains all things.
That's not what Paul's saying. Paul is saying that this rogue angel ordained the law, and that it's inferior, and that we can throw it away because it was ordained by an angel. You're missing the point. He's saying that the law is inferior, should be eliminated because it was ordained by an angel and not God.
Well, no, I don't think that's what this text is saying here. You haven't shown that, but here this just simply means that the messenger of God is sending these laws.
All right, hold on. So this is the word in the interlinear is translated as ordained, diatasso. And diatasso means to arrange, to order, to command, to direct. Meaning, I give orders to, prescribe, or arrange. So this is exactly what God did in the original
Testament. It's God doing it. That's the point. That's the point Paul is making, that it's God doing it.
So it's not an angel.
So how?
Not originating from, but through.
There's no through an angel. God did it directly.
It says it right there. Through. It says through. It says right there, through an angel.
Paul.
Yeah, that's the
Paul
problem.
says
That's the plain meaning of the text.
problem, Jill. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Through God can do it through humans. He can do it through angels.
No.
He can do it through dogs. He can do it through. He can do whatever he wants to do through any vessel he wants. The text clearly says
non
through.
sequitur.
So what you would need to show is that
because God can do it doesn't mean.
Wait a minute.
Paul is.
Well, what you would need to show, the burden of proof is on you to show that this text is communicating that this law originates with the angel, because it says through. So he's using the angel.
It's a reason why it's inferior.
All I have to show is that.
Can you show that it's actually originating with the angel? When God sends an angel, can you show it?
Just try to listen.
Yeah, I'm listening.
Try to listen, Jill. Exodus 31:18. When he had finished speaking with him on Mount Sinai, he gave Moses the 2 tablets of the testimony, tablets of stone written by the finger of God. How do you get from written by the finger of God to ordained through an angel? Can you explain that?
Yeah, where's the angel?
I'm sorry, we're talking about Galatians 19. I'm not sure why you're bringing up other texts that have their own context.
But because it appears to me that the law was written by the finger of God, which would preclude
the 10 Commandments. I've already explained that. The 10 Commandments.
Well, where is the angel?
So why are we bringing that up?
No,
can you answer the question as to how?
What is the question?
The burden of proof is on you.
Yeah. So he's going to prove that the law is not ordained by angels.
In my opinion, Jill, every single one of the laws given to Moses is
exactly what the word means in the Greek. That this is a channel God uses to accomplish His wills. Can you show that?
Let me ask you. I want to ask you something. Can you
actually show that in the text, or no?
Show.
What I'm trying to explain. Hold on. Be quiet for a second. All right. What I'm trying to explain to you is every single law or command given to Moses is given by God directly. There's no angels involved, unless you can prove otherwise. Can you prove otherwise? Can you find a verse where an angel gives any law or commandment or statute or ordinance or anything in the original Testament, in Exodus or Deuteronomy or anywhere?
Yeah, again, we're not talking about Deuteronomy that has its own context. Why don't we stick to Galatians 3?
I said anywhere.
I'm showing you.
All right, he failed. That's the end of that. I'm sorry, Jill, but that was bad even for you. Like,
come on, Jill. I mean, you're saying Galatians contradicts, the Bible. And he's saying, let's stick to Galatians. You can't go to the rest of the Bible where it contradicts it.
I kind of feel sorry for Jill. I feel sorry for all of them because I know this is hard. I really think Jill thinks he's doing the right thing. As crazy as the things he says are, I really think deep down he actually believes what he's saying. So Jill, I booted you because you were just dancing around. So I'm not gonna. And plus, I'm limited on time. Yeah, I booted Jill, everybody, just because he wasn't going anywhere and it wasn't going to go anywhere. He was dancing around in circles, so I booted him. But, it's not the end of Jill. He'll be, it's not permanently banned or anything. So he just wasn't contributing anything to this conversation except confusion and nonsense. So, but yeah, I do have to kind of wind things down, but I really appreciate you coming up, Dirty Varmint, and sharing your insights too. That was really helpful. I don't know what happened to Harlem back there, but I don't know if he lost his connection. I was kind of, enjoying helping him see things that he hadn't seen before, but
yeah, I'd be interested to hear what he has to say about what we were talking about,
Yeah, maybe I'll try and because I've been in communication with Harlem. I've been emailing back and forth with him, so maybe he'll get back to me. And I don't know, but I definitely appreciate you coming up, Dirty Varmint, and
cool. Thanks. Us out there. Yeah, I appreciate you having streams, man. That's cool.
Yep. Thank you so much.
All
I'm
right.
gonna shut things down, Dirty. But until
All
next
right.
time.
Good night.
Night. All right, everybody. Yeah, I hate to I hate to do that to Jill. Like I said, Jill's welcome back. It's not like he's permanently banned or anything, but part of it also is that I'm quite limited on time. I don't have time to dance around and play Jill's games for 3 hours until we finally like convince him that he's wrong, and then he just kind of refuses to acknowledge that. So anyways, I hope that Jill and everyone else is willing to take this into consideration. Again, I'm not someone who's just going to sit up here and say like I'm definitely right, everyone else is definitely wrong. I just try to present the information and hope people come to the best conclusion possible based on. Oh, there's Sherry Hatfield. Always good to see you. Power of One. I was watching what you were saying. How did Moses live if you can't live after seeing God? I don't know. That's a good question. Maybe he had special anointing or something. Exodus 3:20. God says to Moses, "You cannot see my face, for man shall not see me and live." So it could be that there's some sort of metaphorical face-to-face, kind of meaning directly, as in a direct communication, but maybe not necessarily. So let's go to 33:11 just to take a look at this. That was the one where just okay. So this Lord used to speak to Moses face to face, just as a man speaks to his friend. Then 20, but he said, "You cannot see my face, for no man can see me and live." So we'd have to work out like. It could be that when it says face to face, again, I'm theorizing here. Otherwise, we have a contradiction, apparent contradiction. It could be that God, even though it's face to face, perhaps God's face is veiled in some way that would allow Moses to look upon it in a way that wouldn't kill him. I don't know. But face to face doesn't necessarily. I know this sounds weird, but it doesn't necessarily mean that Moses saw God's face directly. It could be that it just is an expression for a very direct form of communication, even though it says face to face. But even though you can speak to someone face to face and not see their face directly, so there's ways of looking at it that way. So that would be an apparent resolution. I'm not saying that is necessarily the resolution. But there's a contradiction between Galatians and Exodus. Jill, can we stick to Galatians? Yeah, that. Oh man. Jill, I'm rooting for you, buddy. I'm rooting for you. I really, I sympathize with you. I think I used to be kind of where you were at one point, trying to defend everything and bend over backwards to fit everything together. And then I kind of had to break free from that. And since then, I really think that I've been much more capable of seeing the fullness of the truth. In a way that will actually restore Christianity, in a way that other people are just kind of wallowing around and kind of preserving the Catholic distortion that's been created, including you, Jill. Nothing against Catholics. A lot of Catholics, I think they love God too. Not a lot of people know the history. A lot of people they haven't been able to do the research that I have, and others. I'm not just me, but others. To find out just how badly things have been corrupted since Christ's time and the apostles' time. But anyways, so this was a good open discussion. We talked to Andy earlier about mimesis. I really don't. I mean, just like I respect Andy. He's clearly a very intelligent person. And I'm not saying he's definitely wrong, but I will say that. I just feel like they take these speculative theories about the myth making in relation to Christianity and they just run with it. And there's a lot of reasons to think that even if there is a little bit of embellishment going on in certain of these texts, like the foundations of Christianity can be seen to have happened in reality. Like, people are not going to attach to a religion that is so obviously a result of mimicking other nearby cultural religious, ideas. It's not going to happen. Christ was a real person. The apostles were real people. They really did go around and spread the gospel. The gospel texts themselves were written in a time when the apostles would still be alive. You don't make a myth and make it so easily falsifiable in real time. You don't say Jesus had 12 apostles who would still be alive when these texts are being written, so that people can go around and say, has anyone seen Peter and Andrew and Philip and Mark and John and all the, that's not, if you're making a myth, you want to make sure that it's like takes place, centuries ago in this kind of, before time in a different land and things like that. No, you're not going to say, yeah, this is where Jesus lived, this is where his family lived, this is his apostles, these are their names, and oh yeah, don't mind the fact that no one's ever seen any of this or any of these people. That's just, a lot of scholars think Mark was probably written by 70 or 80 AD. If you're making a myth and you're putting real names and places in there, or let me say it this way: if you're creating a myth and you're creating characters in your myth and you're trying to present it as reality, and people are eventually, I mean, someone's going to ask, wait, where are these apostles? Where are Jesus' family members? It's talking about Peter and Philip and Thomas and John, and wait, none of these people, no one's ever seen these people. It just doesn't make sense. There really were apostles. They really, now, whether the texts are 100% reliable is certainly a question, but the fact that it's all just a myth and fabricated, I think, is the mythicist position is just, you have to, I think it's every bit as ridiculous as the what they think of Christianity. There's just no way it's, I mean, I wouldn't say no way. I just say it's very, very, very unlikely that all of this is a fabricated myth. Jesus, the apostles, the whole New Testament, and there's all these different myth theories. Either some say Jesus is a creation of Osiris. Some say it's Mithras. Some say it's, Dennis MacDonald says it's Homer's Epics. Joseph Atwill says it's the Caesars created the Gospels and wrote them down and to subdue there's all these different myth-making theories. Which one's correct? If you listen to, they all think they're correct. So, but then you have extra biblical references to the Christians in the first century AD. You have a religion that exploded like wildfire. That's not going to happen if none of the key figures actually existed. You have Papias saying that he knew where the daughters of the apostles lived and had visited their house. It's just, there's so much evidence of there's a real fundamental foundation for Christianity as a historical event. So I just hope Andy kind of thinks about that. I'm not saying he has to agree with me, but hopefully at some point he kind of at least kind of takes that more into factor in consideration. As for faithful apologetics, I was trying to show him some things. I'm not sure what happened. He looks like he dropped, or I don't know what happened to him. I certainly did not boot him. But I'm sorry, folks. I spend a lot of time listening to Christians, their debates, their evangelical channels, their podcasts, very famous ones, not so famous ones. I listen to it a lot. I basically, like, in my spare time, even when I'm working, like, I'll like have my headphones in, listening to them on the radio or on the internet, whatever, just to hear what's being said. And I have concluded that there is no saving. There's nothing worth saving about the current structure. Nothing. It is so distorted, so corrupt, so destructive that there's no reason to dance around the edges and try to preserve it. We need to go back to Christ. We need to go back to the origins. In the beginning, the foundation of the faith was Jesus Christ. Paul was nothing. He was nobody. He wasn't seen as this divinely inspired like replacement for Jesus Christ. I mean, it's time for the Pauline deception to be exposed and rejected. All right, that's what happened. That's the next movement in Christianity. Now, some people will say like, "Oh, you're attacking the Bible. If the Bible falls, Christianity falls." That's a deception the Catholic Church created. They dug this pit in such a way that we would never be able to dig out of it. They're the ones who put Paul in the canon. And then they said the canon was given by God. So if you deny the canon, you're denying God and you're denying Christ. So now, 2,000 years later, we're stuck with this structure that was built by these people. And everyone's trying to figure out how to solve the problems. But very few people see the actual solution. The solution is that really what was built was not what was intended, not commissioned by Christ. What was commissioned by Christ was faith in Christ alone. You know, one of the solas of the Reformation is sola Christus. And I literally heard a pastor recently say, we need to put our faith in Christ alone. And when we read Paul, this is what our salvation comes down to. And I was like, do these people really hear what they're saying? We need to put our faith in Christ alone. And then we read Paul saying ... Does this not register with him that there's some sort of disconnect here? I don't think there's anything wrong with people wanting to say that their Christian faith is founded entirely upon Christ. That to me is what makes the most sense. Now we're in a time where, because of how things have been presented, that's a difficult thing to understand, because it makes you seem like you're denying the faith. But no, that is the origin. That is what it was originally intended to be. So people like Jill, they're defending a superstructure created by the Catholic Church. They don't think of it that way, but that's ultimately what they're doing. They're defending Christianity, quote unquote. Too bad God didn't. You know, I hear this often. Why would God allow this to happen? Why would God let any evil thing happen? Why would God allow false prophets? You see, in the Old Testament, as it's called, I call it the original Testament, all the Jewish people were getting their messages by God through prophets. But we read it right there in the original Testament, there's 1,000 false prophets for every true prophet. Why didn't God stop them? Well, because these prophets had free will. All right? That's what it comes down to. Free will, why does God let people run around stabbing and killing and shooting each other and blowing each other up and stealing from each other and lying to each other? Well, that's the way God has created it. It's a messed up, disturbing world. And God allows us to, but God has commanded us what to do. All right? God, the truth is there. Whether it's distorted or difficult to perceive, the truth is always there for people who are willing to find it. So, I told Jamie that God allowed Paul in the Bible to test us if we love God, and I quoted Deuteronomy 3:13, 1-4, and he banned me. But, well, like I said, I don't want to, name names necessarily, but some people, they want to avoid certain ideas like that. And I don't, I like Jamie. So I won't speak any individual. Yeah, like, they want to defend a system. Where was like, oh yeah, this goes back to what I was saying. When you're defending a system, instead of just asking what the ultimate truth is, you're going to end up in error eventually. So a lot of Christians are defending Christianity. I see these apologists. I know they love Jesus. I know they love God, but they don't realize. Oh, okay, well, that's a good ending. He unbanned you. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, Jamie's a nice guy. I think he's wrong about a lot of what he believes, just like I think a lot of people are wrong. But I think he's a nice person. He, just like a lot of people, he's in error in a lot of things he believes. But that could be said about a lot of people. All right, I'm going to close it down, but I guess to finish, I want to say this. There needs to be these concepts need to be put forward, because I've thought about long enough to where the current structure is leading too many people astray, that it's just there's no other way to do it. You can't save Christianity and defend the current structure at the same time. Something has to give. But so many people are committed to the current structure that it's difficult. But again, I guess my channel is speaking to those people who want to see the truth. Who knows whether this will become a movement or something that will gain momentum. But I'm trying to speak to people who are actually asking questions. And also, all these people out there, I'm not going to name names here either, but there are people who've challenged me to a debate. And I shouldn't say this, because some of them actually have requested to come on my channel, and I've let them. But there are other ones I'm thinking of these people who they get out there, they have their channels, some of them big, some of them not so big. And I've interacted with them, and they call me all kinds of names, insult me. But, they're not dealing with my arguments. What are they hiding? What are they hiding? Why are they trying to? Why these Christian apologists, so called, are defending the deception? I'm trying to help them. I really don't dislike any of them, but they are resistant to certain ideas. But I'm going to keep putting them forward, and I hope it helps people who want to find that truth. Please like and subscribe if you haven't already. Just because I plan on doing more content like this. And whether you agree with me or disagree with me, I think that one of the benefits is I try to present new information to people that they wouldn't get elsewhere. So at least you'll get that. And I have to go, but I appreciate everyone who listened, everyone who participated. And I hope this helped. Until next time, God bless.